Can anyone hear me? Are we good? Are we scuffed? Who knows? Let's check the audio real quick. How's it going, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Trying to see if my sound is good here. I think it should be okay. I don't think anything's really changed. Anyways, welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Welcome in. Have a very fun history lesson for you all today. Spent a lot of time working on it. I hope you guys enjoy it whenever we go over it. But until then, it'll be probably like another 20-30 minutes. I just have to, gonna have to polish up a few things on it while we chat and converse here in the initial stages of the stream here. But I think it's a good one. I think it's better. It's better than the last one. I was really pleased with the last one, so I'm gonna be super pleased with this one. I think. You know, it's a subject that is really near and dear to my heart. As I've told you, I love World War II history, so we're going to be talking about a very important thing that happened in World War II. I don't want to give it away just yet because I want to keep it a secret until it actually happens. So we'll keep it a secret that way. But make sure you guys have your water, have your food, have your whatever, because we're going to be diving in here in just a little bit. But just want to say what's up to everybody who's out there. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all of you coming out tonight. I know it's kind of a late night out here. I did change the stream to be a little bit earlier than what I expected it to be, and then I ended up pushing it back too because I didn't have the PowerPoint fully done, which is fine. Probably should have learned from that, but it's okay. You know, you live and you learn. What are you gonna do? But I like to try to do kind of earlier streams because I know a lot of people can't really, you know, come out and watch sometimes later at night, especially if you're over in Europe. So I'm trying to make it so it's a little bit more European and American time friendly. People are just not getting off of work and everything. Plus Europeans are about to go to bed, so maybe it's a good time, maybe it's not. We'll see what happens. But yeah. It's gonna be a good day, I think. It's gonna be a really, really good day. So, I don't know. You guys tell me, what do you guys like the most about, I guess, World War II history? You guys like war history? I guess that's the question for today. Is war history something you guys are interested in? Do you like that? Is it something you really know a lot about, or is it something you want to learn more about? I guess we'll see. I'll sit over here and yap until somebody answers me. But yeah, no, I'm very excited, like I said, for this. You know, this whole thing. I wonder if I should maybe stream me making the PowerPoint too. That might be an interesting thing to do. I'm not sure. That might be something interesting to ask people if they want to see that in the process behind how I go through some of this stuff. Because I don't know if you guys would be interested in watching that or not. Anyways. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. We just started the stream not too long ago, so please find your seat and get prepared for a history lesson. Make sure you grab your notebooks, your pencil, your paper, and everything. And we'll get started in just a second. I just have to finish up a few things with this. I guess my question is, this might be a better question to ask whenever somebody's chatting, but if you guys want to, I could stream me making it and also doing the lesson itself if you guys are interested. I'm not sure, but that might be giving away too much of what we're talking about. I don't know if I want to do that just yet, but we'll see. We'll see. Anyways. Here's what we'll do. We'll do like last time. I'm going to show a video off for this subject, so I will give it away. and then we will watch the video here. And then once we get done with watching the video, we should be able to do the actual stream itself. So let's do... let me see who's got like a decent history video that's not super long. History Channel's pretty good about this stuff, so let's just watch a History Channel video on it. I'll do this real quick. Give me 1 second. Get it set up here. Is it display capture? Oh, that's not right. Window capture. I don't think that's right either, is it? Yes, it is. Okay, so we'll do that. Boom and boom. Okay, there we go. It's yapping time. Thanks for yapping, Chris. Appreciate you, Mr. Frick Hackers. All right, I'm gonna pause the music real quick, and if you guys couldn't tell what this is already, we're gonna be covering D-Day. That's what our topic today is gonna be. You have ramen? Pookie, what the fuck? Nice, very cool. We're gonna watch this video real quick so I can finish up some PowerPoint stuff. I don't want to bore you guys too much, but very, very good video from History Channel, so we'll watch it real quick. Make sure it's on, yep, 720p. All right. Good video. I always like History Channel. They always have pretty solid stuff about World War II. Yeah, going through that chaos, man, that's super crazy stuff for sure, for sure. No, and that's even crazier because my great grandfather went through that, man, and that was you know, I never met him, I never got to talk to him really, but I can imagine, you know, having to, because so I was in the army before him, right, and so we actually have to do a simulation D-Day essentially, where you are crawling on your stomach, and it's always they wait for the day that it rains really heavily. And you have to crawl on your stomach through barbed wire, right? You go over this hill, you have to lay down. You have to stop every time there's a flare that shoots up in the sky. You have to stop. They shoot machine guns. They're way over your head, obviously, so you're not in real danger, but they shoot it way, way, way high up there. You got tracers flying overhead. You've got barbed wire that you get caught on. You have to like back up, and then you have people behind you, and you're like very confused, and it's actually scary. Like simulates it quite well, I would think. Obviously, you're not in actual danger, but you know, at the moment, like maybe you think you are. Some people did, but you know, you go through that. It's called Nick at Night. It's really cool. And then you get up to the wall, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and you sit there and you wait for everyone behind you to get up there, and then finally, after it's probably like an hour long, so it just simulates like what D-Day was like. It's not even like accurate for how long it was, because that Atlantic Wall, I think, was like, I think they said it's like a quarter mile up from where they landed, and you're having to run through like barbed wire mines, anti-tank traps, you know, gunfire, artillery shells raining on top of you, you know, all this crap that you're having to go through. And then once you finally get up to the wall, right, you have another quarter-mile distance to probably cover, where you have to go up to a barbed wire fence. And then once you get to the barbed wire fence, you have to wait there for all your troops and get Bangalore mines. They get shoved down into the hole underneath the barbed wire. And while this is going on, you're still getting shelled behind you, and you're still getting gunfire rain down either beside you or on top of you. And you blow it up, and then you go through. No, we didn't get to use any of the Bangalore mines or anything like that. So I'm talking about D-Day right now. But they have to blow that up, and then finally, once you get through that, you have to run into a bunker. You have to run up a hill into bunkers, clear out the bunkers, and then you have to go clear out the bunkers up top as well, because it's like these giant pillboxes. So like the entire thing's like filled with, you know, German soldiers, right? So you're having to like take these guys out, or capture them, which they didn't really capture them on D-Day at all. There's a few instances of them capturing it. Obviously, we're talking about Omaha right now more than anywhere else, because other sites weren't as bad. Omaha had the most casualties, right? But, you know, that I can't even imagine what it would have been like to just have to do that. Like, Nick at Night was scary enough on its own, but having to actually do that with actual killer intent coming at you, and you not having any like reprieve from gunfire aside from whenever they're reloading or whenever they're reloading like their artillery shells or whatever, like that is a frightening thought, dude. That's scary. And they didn't just do this like once or twice. Like some of these guys that were at D-Day were also at Sicily, and then they were also at Italy, like southern Italy, which were two other amphibious invasions that happened before this one did. Um, and it speaks to like the courage of the men who did it, right? But it's also like, dude, I can't imagine. I can't even imagine today having to do that. Like it's against like the number one military in the world too. Like that's a frightening prospect. Oh man. And most of those guys had seen or hadn't seen combat too, because a lot of those guys were like new people that they brought in. Because a lot of the people who went to Italy, the only ones who went to D-Day were people who got injured at Italy, or people who had rotated back through for some reason, which, not very rare. It's very rare that happened back in World War II. So I can imagine a lot of these people were like fresh to combat in general. Maybe they were North African veterans or whatever, but a lot of those guys went to Italy as well. So. Um, yeah, dude. Ugh, gosh. Uh, all right. Sorry about that. I'm just typing up some last minute changes to this. So, I'm not gonna do a slide for this maybe, but I am going to add a couple of pictures in, and then we can get started. So please forgive me. I think we can do probably. Let's see here. Okay, this is a good one, right? We can watch this one. We'll watch one more. This will give me a little bit more time to let you guys watch something. I have a friend named Mike, and he's super into World War II. And about 2-ish years ago, we all met up in NOLA to go to one of our friends' weddings, and we went to the World War II Museum. Yes, so World War II Museum is really cool because it's not just like the big parts of World War II. It's like every part of World War II, like the smallest member of any force to like the biggest, most important person have things in there. It's really cool to see. If you've never been to it, it's in New Orleans, Louisiana. Definitely go. I went last year. It was super cool. I wish I would have had more time to spend there. I really would have loved to have spent like a week just doing that because there's so much information and history in it. But if you really, really, really love history, come to New Orleans, go check it out. I say come to New Orleans like I live there. I don't live there. I don't live in New Orleans. But if you do like history, I would highly recommend going and checking out that. But I'm going to watch Simple History, World War II, D-Day video real quick. This is a pretty quick one, so this wouldn't take too long, but if you guys want to get some more information on here we go.
D-Day, World War II, June 6, 1944. By June 6, 1944, the Allies had landed 150,000 men in Normandy. The 5 beaches were secure, and the troops were pushing inland. The Allies had gained air and sea superiority. However, the landing forces were not as strong as they could have been due to limited landing craft and paratroop aircraft. To combat this, months of intensive air attacks were carried out against railway lines, roads, and bridges across France with the aim of making it difficult for the Germans to move reinforcements easily into Normandy. At the same time, a deception was in motion to convince the Germans that the Allies were planning to land further east in the Pas-de-Calais region. These strategies were both a success. Allied Supreme Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower led 3 million men, 13,000 aircraft, 2,500 landing craft, and 1,200 warships. New equipment included 2 tank variants, the obstacle crossing tank and the bunker busting tank used on the Anglo-Canadian beaches. In addition to this, amphibious tanks were used by all attack formations. Follow-up formations would use the Mulberry Harbors with the fuel supplied by Pluto, standing for Pipeline Under the Ocean. The Germans were aware of an Allied invasion, but lacked any intel of where it would be coming from or its strength. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel commanded the German forces in northern France and believed that his only chance was to defeat the invading force before it got ashore. He wanted to spread his reserves along the coast so that they could attack the landing forces straight away, as the Allied air forces would make it difficult to redeploy more distant units. Rommel's superior, Commander-in-Chief West Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, meanwhile wanted a strong central reserve that would be sent in once it was obvious where the main Allied landings were taking place. In the end, there was a compromise. Some reserves were near the Normandy coast, but were not allowed to be deployed without permission from Hitler. The landings. There were 5 landing areas: Utah and Omaha, which involved U.S. troops, and Gold, Juno, and Sword, which involved British and Canadian troops. 2 U.S. airborne divisions landed by parachute and glider inland from Utah, and 1 British airborne division on the east flank of Sword. They took most of their objectives and disrupted possible German counterattacks. On Omaha Beach, German resistance was the most fierce, with heavy Allied casualties. But by the end of the day, the beach was clear. Utah Beach was the easiest to clear, while the other 3 beaches were somewhere in between. It was important for the Allied troops to gain as much territory as possible, to make room for the follow-up forces. The inland advance later in the day, however, came up short of the D-Day objectives of Caen and Bayeux. There would be much harder fighting in the days to come. Subscribe to see more history videos. Get Simple History, World War II, out today.
Yeah, get that. Shout out to Simple History, bro. Simple History's sick. Love those guys. They make great content. If you ever want to subscribe to somebody for actual, like, good content for, like, history, these guys are them. I love Simple History, even though I'm not subscribed to them on this account. This is like the account to do this on, this is the account to, like, watch for history stuff. If you really do enjoy history, highly, highly, highly recommend anything that they put out. They do really good research on stuff, and they really, really do great work on their animations too, in my opinion. That's just me. I'm very biased about that, though. I feel like a lot of history people recently have been getting, like, I have to do animations and also do history, so it's like, oh, okay, well, you know, that's pretty sick, but, you know, sometimes their animations aren't up to snuff, and that's okay. I don't care about the animations as much as I like the actual content itself inside of the video, right? So for me, they have very short, sweet, to the point videos. You watch them. It's something that you would put on in, like, a history class if, like, you know, you had, like, students that were like, oh, I want to watch something that they teach. Can we watch something or whatever? And then that's what you would put on, right? So I have one more thing to put on here, and then we should be good to go for this thing here. Let's see. How do I want to put this up here? That looks good. All right, let me make sure real quick. Boom. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, yep, looks good. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put this up real quick and put it onto my slideshow. Beginning. Make sure that I got this up. I think I need to do... Is it this one? Oh, hang on. Alright, can you guys hear me this time? I think I'm in the right position now. I need to make myself smaller. And make sure that my OBS has me still. Okay, sweet. I think we should be good. Let me just check one more thing. And... Yep, okay. Looks like we're good to go. So, welcome everybody to the actual history lesson for today. So we are going to be talking about D-Day. So June 6, 1944, D-Day by Max Forge. So let's make sure we got everything up and at 'em here. So let's go. So the who, what, when, where, and why. So this is going to be important for you. We're taking notes. We're taking lessons here. Or excuse me, we're taking notes here. So make sure you take notes, guys, because we're going to have a quiz at the end. I'm just joking. We're not going to have a quiz. Unless you guys want a quiz, then I can do it. But the who, what, when, where, and why. So what was D-Day? So D-Day was the name that they gave to the Allied invasion of Normandy the day that it began. So the actual amphibious invasion that occurred. And the D from D-Day actually stands for day. So it was a way that they determined the actual day that a thing would happen. D-Day, or Day, as it's called, is the actual time when an operation occurs. It's the day that an operation occurs. So it's, I forget what the hour is, because there's an hour associated with it, but I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. I tried to find it, but it took me a little bit too long to find it, and I had to do some other stuff. But it's essentially D-Day is Day, the first day of the operation for the liberation of northern France from German Reich-occupied France. I don't know if I want to say the N word for. Oh, I probably shouldn't say not that one. The evil mustache man word for that. Because I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble if I say that. So, but I just said N word, so I'm gonna get lambasted for that too. Not the actual one, but anyways, who was involved in D-Day? So D-Day involved the battle between Allied forces. So this is mainly consisting of United States Army, the United Kingdom's army, and their subsidiary states at the time. So that would be South Africa, Rhodesia, Australia, New Zealand, British Raj, and some other colonies throughout the Southeast Asia, Southern Asia, and the Middle East, as well as Africa. Lots and lots of different troops. A lot of people helped out with this, and it's not just those guys, but they were the main forces for this invasion itself, along with Canada and France. And whenever I say France, the French were not. There were a few hundred French that were involved with the initial invasion itself, which was D-Day. They were commandos that were left over from, I believe it was the encirclement at Dunkirk, which if you don't know that, we can cover that in another time. But specifically, the ones I'm talking about for France are the French resistance forces. Those guys helped out a lot with the paratroopers, as well as establishing communication and lines of supply with invasion forces. So they are very important to this story. Unfortunately, I don't have anything sound on them in front of me because of limited time for getting this solved. But I do want to touch on that they were very important, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. So when and where was D-Day? So D-Day was June 6th, 1944, at about 0700 in the morning. 0630 was whenever 0, which was the midnight, right? Would have been the initial paratrooper invasion. 0630 was the initial bombardment of the beach by air and sea. And then 07 was whenever the troops came in after the initial bombardment. And the Allies landed at 5 different beaches, and we'll talk about those a little bit later and why. And the reason for this was it was a part of Operation Overlord, and the reasoning for that was to liberate France and establish another Allied front against the Axis in Europe. So, fun fact at this time, Germany had already invaded Russia, so they were fighting on the east side, and they were actually losing a lot of ground by 1944. In the south, they were also fighting with the Italians against the U.S. forces down south. So they were fighting very hard in Italy, and we'll talk about that maybe in a different time. But for right now, let's move on to who produced the idea for D-Day. This is a very unknown person for a lot of people who are kind of casual to history. So let's talk about him. So his name is Lieutenant General Frederick Morgan. He was actually assigned as the Chief of Staff to the newly created position of Supreme Allied Commander, which was vacant for a majority of 1943 after they made it, because they were debating. There was a huge thing from 1942 to 43, like the end of 43, of whether it should be the Americans or the British who lead the Allied forces in Europe. And that's because Field Marshal Montgomery, who is the head German guy, and Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the lead American guy, along with Patton, had these very, very open and very, very political scrums against each other that ended up being very toxic, if I guess is the word, between each other, and it actually led to a lot of issues with them in Italy and North Africa before this happened. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But for right now, what you need to know is Frederick Morgan. He is I believe, a British lieutenant general. He's assigned as chief of staff, specifically for planning at the new Allied headquarters, or SHAEF, as it's called, SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters of Allied European Forces. Morgan was tasked with being the principal planner for not only the invasion of Normandy, but the operation to free occupied France. It was not known as Operation Overlord at this time. They did not have a name for it. Morgan and his team ascertained that the best way to open the front and France was actually to utilize a combined naval, air, and land assault, which would begin with a large-scale amphibious assault in northern France, but could not come to an agreement as to where in northern France it should be. Morgan and his men submitted their initial plans for the invasion in July of 1943, leaving the open-ended question of where to invade come the following year. It wasn't until insistence from Stalin to open a second front at the Tehran Conference in December of 1943, and the appointment of General Dwight D. Eisenhower as Supreme Commander of Allied Forces in Europe, that more detailed preparations for Operation Overlord were actually made. And without Morgan and his people's initial planning, though, the planning and details for D-Day itself, as well as Operation Overlord, probably would have taken another year or longer to do, and that's based off of estimates from fellow British and American officers that worked in the Supreme Headquarters for Allied European Forces. He was actually demoted after after Eisenhower assumed office, because Walter Bedell Smith, I believe, was the assistant. He was the guy who was ahead of General Morgan, and then whenever he got kicked down because Eisenhower wanted to bring his guy in from his command, so Bedell got demoted down to chief of staff, and then Frederick Morgan got demoted down to chief of staff, but he was still in charge of operations. And he worked with Eisenhower and Bedell Smith and the other guy who I cannot remember his name, and all four of them were the heads of Supreme Headquarters in Europe. So Eisenhower and lessons of the past, and this is a picture not of Eisenhower but a picture of instead Mr. Patton, and I will talk about why Mr. Patton is important for just a minute after we get a little bit more in depth in here. So after General Eisenhower assumed control of Allied forces, he knew how massive of an undertaking this invasion was going to be. And this is during, this is after the events that we're about to talk about. Eisenhower saw what happened with Allied forces, when Allied forces failed to communicate and work together firsthand in North Africa. British and American forces continuously had breakdowns in communication, which led to contempt and mistrust between their forces, overextensions by both armies, which led to routes from the German military, and overall battlefield confusion, which sometimes led to blue-on-blue casualty events. If you don't know what a blue-on-blue is, that is ally-on-ally casualty events. So that means that you are shooting at your friends and you hurt them, which was very prevalent in North Africa because a lot of the lines of communication were very poor because it was in the middle of a desert, number one, and number two, people were not paying attention to each other's battle plans. So Eisenhower actually first took charge of his U.S. forces at the start of 1943 in North Africa. His first battle that he led was at Kasserine Pass, and the first battle in which the U.S. Army met the Wehrmacht, which is the German army, who was led by General Erwin Rommel. General Rommel is actually one of the best generals of all time. A lot of people consider him one of the best generals of all time. He wrote a book on how to actually fight in World War II's era of warfare, and there's a famous, if you've ever seen the movie Patton, what happens next, there's a funny line in the movie where he's like, you son of a bitch, I read your book, and it's actually referencing Patton actually did read Rommel's book, and that's how he learned how to defeat him in North Africa. So, well, where does Patton come into all of this? Well, after Eisenhower's forces were absolutely destroyed by Rommel's tactical genius and failed to adapt, the British forces actually started questioning if the Americans had the stomach or the ability to fight the Germans, because they were very hesitant to fight with us to begin with. Because since World War One, we were very isolationist. We didn't really reach out or do anything for them, aside from Lend-Lease, which was only for a few years before we actually joined the war. But Eisenhower decided he was going to change up everything. He said, I need to learn from this. I need to go giga brain mode, essentially. I need to turn my way of fighting, my philosophy of how I fight this war, on its head. I need to change everything. I need to change my tactical approach. I need to change my intelligence operations. I need to add in commanders who are actually going to get the job done and not just quit on me. So he hires two generals that are very important. The most important one, though, is General George S. Patton. Eisenhower and Patton were friends from a while back at West Point, and Patton was very, very, very good at tank fighting. North Africa had a lot of tank fighting, especially against Rommel. Rommel was a Panzer commander, which was a tank for the German armed forces at the time, and Patton was the Sherman guy. So those two had legendary battles in North Africa with, I think Patton won every single one except for one of them. And that one was because he was outnumbered, but he wasn't even there to command it, so technically his forces lost. It wasn't actually him. But the changes were huge, made a massive difference in how we fight in North Africa, and ends up leading to us and the British. So it's Patton, Eisenhower, Montgomery, all sweeping the British out of North Africa. They had initially gotten them out of Tunis. They went around and dropped down back into, like, I think it was like Libya. That's where, I think it's where Kasserine Pass is. I'm trying to remember exactly where Kasserine Pass is. I want to say it's like the eastern side of North Africa, but I'm drawing a blank on my geography right now. But very bad thing that happened. And they ended up having to take Kasserine Pass later on, and Patton led the charge and actually ended up winning the battle for them with his troops. So Eisenhower and the Lessons of the Past, Part 2. So Eisenhower learned from his mistakes in North Africa and how important Allied communication and his structure of his forces was going to be. And he had to learn from a new operation he was about to be in charge of, which was Operation Husky, which was the invasion of Sicily. So it was initially planned to begin at night on July 9th, 1943, and it ended on August 17th of 1943. It was the first large amphibious invasion of World War II from the Americans. It was also an airborne assault, and this is where we start learning a lot about how Eisenhower really takes accountability for what he does as a leader and learns from things and adds them into his tactics going forward, right? So Eisenhower was placed in charge of this invasion. After he showed the ability to adapt and overcome adversity during the campaign in North Africa. Montgomery was also placed as his second in charge, and then he placed Patton as his, second in charge of Allied forces, but he placed Patton as his second, and then I said he hired two generals, which were very important. The second one that he hired, which was important for this campaign, was Omar Bradley. If you don't know the Bradley, there's a Bradley fighting vehicle that's named after him. That's one of the U.S.'s military vehicles right now. It's named after Omar Bradley. But those two were very good friends. Patton and Bradley actually were very good friends, and they ended up they were chasing. It was those two and Montgomery were actually chasing each other for land in Sicily, and Patton was so fast that he ended up conquering the British command points that they were trying to capture before the British even got there. And it made Montgomery so mad that him and Patton started fighting more than Eisenhower and Montgomery did. And it actually led to Patton being kind of relieved of command at the end of it, because he got into a lot of political squabbles, kind of like how I was talking about earlier. There was like this famous, I think it was a Time News article that he talked about. He talked about Eisenhower, Bradley, and Montgomery. It was essentially calling them all buffoons who didn't know how to fight, and they were pansies because they wouldn't let people just keep pressing until they fought to the last drop of, I think the last drop of gasoline, the last yeah, the last drop of gasoline, last drop of blood, and the last bullets fired, I think was the comment he said. Um, and then even then, he still wanted to press on. But that's another time. I want to cover Patton someday too. He's a great inspiration of mine. Um, so Eisenhower Allied forces successfully captured Sicily on August 17th, 1943, and Eisenhower had seen a few things that were particularly interesting to him about this invasion. So firstly, Eisenhower actually realized how effective Allied paratroopers could be at holding key positions behind enemy lines and preventing forces from reinforcing and resupplying overwhelmed positions throughout the first week of the invasion. So I said earlier this was an airborne assault too. So they did essentially what they were going to do on D-Day. They sent over. Oh crap! What up, Irvine? Welcome in. Hello, Raiders. You just joined us. Oh snap! Appreciate it. Thanks, Irvine. Appreciate it. Welcome in, Raiders. Thank you. Thank you. I don't even have my notifications on because this is my work in progress thing, but I appreciate it. You joined us near the start of our D-Day talk. But right now we're learning about what Eisenhower learned from his invasion of Sicily and how he applies it to D-Day. So welcome in, everybody. I hope you guys enjoy history. My name's Max Forge. I'm a history-loving VTuber. That's what I do. That's what I talk about. We do history lessons every Wednesday night and every Saturday. We talk a little bit about history, do a lot of yapping, do a lot of fun activities, and we play games. So we play historical games mostly on Saturdays. So if you guys enjoy what you see, please follow. I liked Irvine's content, so I appreciate him stopping by, and hopefully you guys all stay around and watch the stream with me, or watch the PowerPoint that I'm presenting rather. But yeah, kind of new to the whole VTuber scene too. It just started about a month ago, so if you guys have any suggestions, I do have a suggestion box down below, so if you have any suggestions, please leave them for me. Anyways, let's get back to it. So, talking about paratroopers. So, Eisenhower really learned a lot about how important paratroopers were. And he saw how they could hold small points that were very crucial for enemy forces to get supplied at, or to get oil, or to just reinforce to have a strategic advantage over his forces. And he said, well, if I can utilize these guys to my advantage, technically speaking, we can stop them from doing any type of movement against us that we don't want them to, and we can just use a small force of very highly trained people to hold these. And this is where you start seeing the creation of like airborne forces also becoming special forces. This happened a lot in World War II, just if you don't know that. SAS and a lot of these other forces like that were really found to be like very influential in a lot of these battles because of things like this. And a lot of it's because of Eisenhower and Montgomery's use of their tactics in Italy. And second thing he found out, right, after the paratroopers, was there was a thing called Operation Mincemeat, right, which they used a cadaver from a morgue in London. They placed fake transcripts between two fake generals talking about how there was going to be an Operation Husky and an Operation Nightwolf, I think was the other one. And they said, well, Nightwolf's going to happen next year, and then Husky's going to happen in July to August, but it's going to be in Greece. So the Germans fell for it hard as hell. They essentially, what happened was the Spaniards, because if you don't know, the Spanish had just gotten out of a civil war. They were very fascist. They were very friendly towards the Germans. They ended up sending all this information to German high command, and the Germans fell for it hook, line, and sinker, dude. They fell face first into the biggest blunder in history, I would argue, for this. Essentially, what happened was they moved a lot of troops into Greece from Italy. So all these Italians were left defending their positions instead of Germans, which Germans were important for like every defense in Europe at the time. So anyways, what happens was they move all their German soldiers out of Sicily and southern Italy. They move them over to Greece, and they're like, there's no invasion here. Wait a minute. And they look back over and they see all the Italians running for the hills back into mainland Italy. And so they actually moved those troops back into Italy after that. And that's what makes the Italian campaign go really slow after that. If you're not familiar with the Italian campaign, very grindy, very hard to fight because they literally made defenses. They fought Americans tooth and nail for every bit of that land in Italy. So, moving on. these are the two things Eisenhower learned. He learned how to use paratroopers. He learned how to use deception tactics. Very, very important for later on in D-Day. So planning and preparations. I'm going to move myself out of this frame for a second. So, so the Allies, they used the plans that Lieutenant General Morgan had been making with his team, right? And they actually determined that there were only 3 places that were ideal places to land out of the entirety of northern France, right? So the first was Calais, which was the closest spot to England. If you're not familiar, it's the literal northernmost point of France, and it's right across from the southernmost point of England. And that was the most obvious location. And in fact, Angry Mustache Man, because I don't know if I can say the other word on stream, had actually always believed that the Allies would invade Calais if they had returned to Europe. He thought for sure if they're invading France, they're going to be at Calais. So they said, we can't do Calais. Calais doesn't work. The other one's Brittany. So Brittany, Angry Mustache Man seems like a good substitution. Yeah, it's true. Brittany is the more northwestern part of France. It's a peninsula. So if you ever see that little part of France that like sticks out in the like top left part of it, that's Brittany. And they actually determined that this would prolong the liberation of France due to how far west it was, and it could also allow Germans time to build up defenses in central and eastern France, should they choose to do so. So they said, well, we can't do that. It would take too long. It allowed the Germans to come back into the war. We don't want to deal with that, right? So what do? They say, what's the third option? They say, well, the third option is Normandy. Now, historically, Normandy is very important to England. Normandy is where, what's his name? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget his name on this stream of all places. William the Conqueror, or William the Bastard. He was the Duke of Normandy, which is where you get like modern day English like royalty is from him. Normandy is very important to the British historically. They wanted to use that, but the problem with Normandy is that it actually historically, and this is what's funny about the relationship between this place with Britain, is whenever William the Conqueror invaded Britain, right, he couldn't go at first to face the king at the time in England because there were bad storms at that sea at that point. Normandy is very famous for having very, very bad choppy seas and heavy flooding, very bad rainfall, everything. So back then, what the King of England did, he raced up north, and then William ended up conquering or crossing over after the rainfall stopped. So funnily enough, the opposite happens here, where the Allies say, well, there's a lot of choppy seas and heavy flooding here, but we don't have another option. It's either this or we have to circle around and find out some other plan, maybe invade Norway, which would take even longer because then we have to cross to Denmark. We can't invade mainland Germany. It's just too much, you know, it's too much prep. It's too much artillery we have to use. We don't have it right now. So Eisenhower and his staff, which included Morgan, determined that Normandy would be the best of the 3 options, and they set about creating detailed plans. Allied Command comes up and makes a plan that on June 5th of 1944, they're going to invade. Initially starting with Allied paratroopers landing behind enemy lines at around midnight to seize key supply hubs and prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beach. After this, there would be a massive naval and air bombardment, which would commence on the German defenses on the beaches at Normandy, at the 5 planned landing spots at 06:30. With Allied infantry forces being brought to shore shortly thereafter. And essentially, this was the date that they set, right? So they move in all of these troops into England. All these Americans, all these Canadians, they come over on ships. They get there months in advance. They're starting to plan up all this stuff. And they start making these preparations for the initial invasion. One of the preparations that they did, we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, is... Actually, we're going to talk about it here in the next slide. Is a fake army that is made in 2 spots in England, actually. The most notable one is the southern one. There's also a northern one which was made, and we'll talk about both of those in a minute. The other thing that they do is they start training paratroopers very, very intensely, right? So after their initial graduation, they get shipped over to England. They do more training. They learn how to be self-sufficient. They learn how to find resupplies. They learn how to connect with French forces. They learn a little bit of French. They learn a little bit of German, just so if they do get caught, they can surrender or if they find a French person, they can be like, oh, I'm part of the resistance, or I'm helping the resistance, or whatever. So they go through these grueling, arduous processes. You've got people moving all the time. There's a lot of bickering between German and, or not German, but English and American sailors and soldiers because they're all stealing each other's women and this and that and the other. It's a whole kerfuffle. It's like a Wild West cartoon up in England, and it gets to about a week before, and meteorology reports start coming in, and they're like, so it looks like it's going to be raining the 4th and the 5th of June. They're like, well, let's wait. Let's see what happens, right? So the 3rd of June happens, no rain. 4th of June happens, rains all day. They're like, okay, well, let's check for tomorrow. 5th of June, rains again. Finally, the morning of the 6th, they're like, or I guess it's the night of the 5th still. They say, look, we just got another meteorology report. It's going to be heavily overcast, but we don't think it's going to rain. We should do it now. So they end up making the plan to be the 6th after the horrible weather events. And this is when Eisenhower plays his little trick up his sleeve. And we go into Operation Fortitude, or the Great Distraction. So this is a deception tactic that involved building a fake army to distract Germany from true Allied plans for D-Day. So Operation Fortitude had a North and a South plan. So it's Operation Fortitude North, Operation Fortitude South. The North plan was to make the Germans think that the Allies had actually planned initially to invade Norway in spring of 1944. So they build this huge fake army up there in the north. I think it's close to, I want to say Edinburgh. They build it up there. And they're like, look, there's troop movements on these pictures. So the reconnaissance planes for Germany fly over. They take pictures. They're like, look, they're moving. We know they are a real force. This is a real group of people. And some of his generals were like, I don't think they did really do Norway, though, but let's keep our forces on high alert anyways. So they put their forces on high alert in Norway, and spring of 1944 comes. They're like, well, maybe they'll wait till summer because we have reports of Allied troops, being ushered in still. So maybe they're delaying it. And then Operation South happens, right? So they take a different army, they build it up. I want to say it's like close to where that point, the southernmost point of England is. It's somewhere close to central England, maybe, or like southern central England. They build up this fake army, has inflatable tanks, they have fake artillery pieces, they've got fake planes, they've got dummy people, they actually have real soldiers who are just like admin personnel just walking around with sticks, like holding the people up and like moving the trucks around and stuff. They have real trucks in there too that are like making tracks for them. There's a story where they actually placed a tank shell, not like an actual like tank, but like an inflatable shell on top of a Jeep, and the Jeep would drive around with some type of like thing that they developed for like treads, and it would make it look like there was actually a tank moving around with treads on it. And the Germans keep seeing this, and they're like, dude, they're definitely going to invade Calais. It's coming. Summer 1944, dude. Believe it. It's happening. It's real. And so Hitler falls for it because he hears his people saying, he's like, okay, guys, we have to make sure all of our soldiers are in like Calais at this time. So I said it, didn't I? Oh, boo me. Oh, well. Well, and now I can just say it. Oh, well. Angry Mustache Man. So Angry Mustache Man believes it, right? And he's like, okay, move all of our troops over to Calais. We have to defend Calais. It's the most important place. So he moves all these troops over there. And he tasked Rommel months ago. So we're going to talk about Rommel here in a second. But Rommel is the leader of the Atlantic Wall. So he's taking troops from Rommel's people. And he's moving them to Calais. Now, Calais is still on the Atlantic Wall, technically, but it's way further east than what Rommel wanted it to be. And he's like, well, at the end of the day, I could probably still get him back in time if there was an initial invasion. I just have to make sure I plan it perfectly. So the fake army does its job. It fools the high command completely to into following and making meticulous preparations for an invasion of Calais. Just thinking about the fake inflatable thing. Did the U.S. make a giant inflatable town or something? Like a fake town on top of a base? Yes, so they made a fake town. So essentially, I think that was in World War II also as well. But I think that was in America. I don't know if it was in England. Yeah, so essentially they had a town. Or it was a military production factory area that had like a town near it. And essentially what they did is they said, we're just going to disguise this entire like military complex plus the military production factory as a town, and there's nothing of worth here for anyone to bomb. So we're just gonna do that, and it actually worked too. But then again, no one really bombed there. But anyways, invasion force. So we talk about the forces are arriving in, right? They're coming into England. There's hundreds of thousands of people coming in. American forces for Omaha, Utah, plus airborne forces number at about 73,000 troops total. British forces who were already in country or had been coming back. A lot of these guys were veterans of Dunkirk. If you don't know Dunkirk, that was the final defeat that England and France had on the mainland of Europe prior to them coming back during D-Day. A lot of these guys are leftovers from that battle specifically. And they have about 61,715 troops, and that's including all of gold and sword beaches plus their airborne units. And then the Canadian forces come over with the Americans. They have about 21,400 troops, and that's for Juno Beach. So in total, the Allied troops at landing for D-Day number at about 156,115. That is just infantry or airborne members. That is not including Air Force, and that is not including the Navy. Allied forces also included soldiers from Belgium, Norway, Poland, Luxembourg, Greece, Czechoslovakia, New Zealand, and Australia. I wanted to add that in because I said before a lot of these forces were actually British colonial troops or British, what's it called? Not colonial troops. British Commonwealth forces, I think is the name of it. So, there's people from like India, there's people from New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Rhodesia, some of these people who aren't normally talked about because they are from English colonies, essentially. So I wanted to give them a shout out too because they did play a part in this. And then 177 French commandos, plus a lot of civilians for the French resistance who assisted the paratroopers. Shout out to those guys because they put their lives on the line, even though they didn't even sign up for the military. They still put their lives on the line for our troops, and I am very appreciative of the French resistance. So shout out to them. There was 11,590 Allied aircraft that were involved in supporting the landings themselves. This includes Allied transport aircraft and fighters and bombers. There were 1,213 naval combat ships, 4,126 landing ships or crafts, 736 ancillary craft, 864 merchant vessels, totaling at about 7,000 total naval vessels that were involved in D-Day. 80% of them were British, 16.5% belonged to the US, and the rest were made up from ships from France, Holland, Norway, and Poland. And this is actually a picture of the flotilla after D-Day ended. This is what it looked like whenever we were landing massive amounts of stuff on the beaches. So the beachheads, what were they called? These are important beachheads to note because there were only 5 of them. And there are a few other things that I didn't make in this slide that I'm going to talk about as well. There is Utah Beach, which was entirely done by the American 4th Infantry Division. This had the lightest casualties of all the beaches at 197 killed or wounded. It was the least defended because I believe it was the furthest west, I believe. Omaha Beach, which was the most central, I think it was the second most centralized one, but it was like in the middle of all of their defenses, contained the American 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions. My grandfather was actually in the 1st Infantry Division, which is called the Big Red One, and was injured during his time at D-Day from a artillery shell. Shout out to him. He's a great guy, or was a great guy. Never met him though, but shout out to him. Proud of what he did for our country. Next up, Omaha had the heaviest casualties of all beaches at 2,400 casualties, and that's a rounding up of casualties, I believe, because the initial casualty estimate I got this from was actually the U.S. military's website, so the casualties seem to be pretty rounded, unless you're talking about Utah, which were more accurate because it was less casualties. Call of Duty has a Big Red One game. Yeah, I know. It's pretty sick. I love that game. I think it was Call of Duty 3? Actually, that might have been a PS2 exclusive. I can't remember. But anyways, Gold Beach, which was the British 50th Infantry Division, had 400 casualties. Juno, which was controlled by the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division, as well as the British 2nd Army 1st Corps, who also assisted with Sword Beach. Juno had 1,200 casualties, making it the 2nd heaviest casualty of the day. And a lot of people don't know about that. The Canadians actually had to put up a big fight with the Brits at Juno. And a lot of people don't touch on Juno, and I wish I would have known a little bit more about this before going into it, because Juno is actually one of those beaches I don't know much about. A lot of times whenever you hear about the British and the others landing, it's like, oh, they're riding bicycles on because of how easy it is. It's not necessarily true. Some, like later on, it's true because people start coming in after the battles died down and people do silly stuff like that. But at the time, whenever the Canadians land, it's almost as bad as Omaha Beach is. Like, it's significantly affected how they fought on that beach. And I'll shout out to the Canadians and the Brits that were on that beach, because without them, I think the amount of casualties probably would have been even heavier in some of the other beaches. And then lastly, but not less importantly, Sword Beach, which was controlled by the British 3rd Division, 3rd Infantry Division, I believe, had 630 casualties, making it 3rd. So in order from greatest to least, it would have been Omaha, Juno, Sword, Gold, and then Utah at the very bottom. And these were horrible fighting conditions for these troops coming on land. And here's a picture of Eisenhower with airborne troops prior to them getting sent over. So there's this big speech I want to play. I'm going to play it in the background. So I'm going to make sure that my audio actually gets picked up here. So give me 1 second. I want to make sure I have it. There is a very, very, very important thing that happens. Oh, that's not what I want to hang on 1 second. Oh, double speaking. Sorry, guys. 1 second. Gotta remove this. It's scuffed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry it's scuffed, guys. I got to add in... Is it media source? That doesn't seem right. Audio output. There we go. Is it output? Oh, dang it. Anyways, I'm going to play this real quick. Let me pull it up very fast. It's from Eisenhower. He gives a speech on D-Day to the people who are about to invade. And it's a very, very important speech, I think, for all of us to hear. So please forgive me 1 more second, guys. Okay. All right, here we go. Here we go.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
Woo! I guess that makes me want to run through a fucking wall. I'm not gonna lie. Dwight D. Eisenhower's a goat, dude. One of the greatest generals, one of the greatest presidents ever, in my opinion. Respectfully, in my opinion. But yeah, Dwight D. Eisenhower gives that speech hours before these paratroopers actually leave, and this supposedly he said something similar to them in this circle, talking about how important their job was. And these airborne guys were very, very important. And unfortunately, I did not have time to finish my full PowerPoint with these guys. So let's just remember what these guys did. They went through months of training at a cost of about $50 extra. I think, or $5. I can't remember how much money it was. It wasn't very much more money from their military pay, but they had to put that money up. They got paid that to go join this special new thing called Airborne School. They went through Airborne School, very hard. You had to get battle hardened essentially as a new recruit fresh out of basic and AIT, which, for you guys who don't know, AIT is Advanced Individual Training, which is your job whenever you get out of basic training in the Army. So they have to go through all that, and then after they go through all of that, they get into Airborne School. They have to do humongously long marches and runs, and they have to train how to fall with dozens of pounds of equipment along with their bodies out of an airplane. The parachutes are not that great. I'm going to be honest. There was a lot of parachute casualties from people just falling out of the sky because the chutes would not open properly, or because they get tangled up, or some other freak accident would happen. It still happens today, unfortunately. It's not as bad, though, because we've had advancements in technology. But these guys are doing this just because they want to get extra paycheck, because they want to have the thrill, whatever it might be. Then they get told that they are about to be a part of the most important invasion in history. And not only are they going to be a part of the most important invasion in history, they're going to be one of the most important and key parts of this. So what Eisenhower does, along with British intelligence, right after these guys get to England, he starts setting up communication lines with the French resistance forces. So the British use their contacts back in France to get in contact with these people, and essentially they build up caches of supplies that the troops, whenever they land, can then go find more stuff. After they get out of all their paratrooper gear, they throw their chutes and whatever to the wayside. And so the French resistance starts building up these stuff. And the night before the invasion happens, they send out a radio announcement to the French resistance. It's a encoded message, so no one understands it, except for the French resistance forces, who then go out and they start putting out these like spikes in the ground, like little lights and stuff, to show the paragliders and the paratroopers where to land and where to essentially go for their supply caches. So they start coming over at night, right? And if you know anything about airplanes, they're very loud, especially back then, because they had big old propellers, and you could hear them for like miles. So they're flying overhead, right? And they get right into France, just right on the coast, and they start getting fired at from anti-aircraft fire, and they have flak, so it's like exploding up and bursting. It's like taking out a lot of these, planes, and these guys bail out. They start jumping out, and the winds from the storm still had not died down, so these guys are blown miles off course from where they're supposed to be landing. People are getting stuck in trees. People are falling into swamps. They're falling into flooded lands. One guy lands in the middle of a German town and is hanging up from a tower, and the Germans end up shooting him. There are things like that happen throughout the night. People fall out of the sky without their parachutes deploying, and people find them the next day. It's horrible. It's one of the worst things that could happen to you, but they are still successful in their mission, which is to hold these key strategic points. Even though they're spread out, even though they're so far away from like where they're landing, the remnants of these airborne companies start finding each other, and they have a call sign, and they have a thing called a cricket. And a cricket is like this little device that you click, and it goes right. And so you do that a couple of times, and if somebody answers back with the same number, they're friendly, right? And then you can also do, I think the call sign was flash and lightning. So if you call out flash and they say lightning back to you, that's a friendly. So they end up finding each other doing these little things like this. They find the resistance forces. They start blowing up railways. They start blowing up key supply hubs. They start destroying roads so that tanks and other artillery pieces can't get in there, or troop transport trucks can't get in there. And they're holding on to key positions throughout the night. And this lasts for an entire day almost until other troops get to them from the invasion at the beaches. These guys were so instrumentally important that they made an entire show on them for HBO. And if you haven't seen the show, I highly recommend it. It's called Band of Brothers. Very, very good show. It is on HBO Max. I think it's on Netflix right now, actually. It was made and produced by Tom Hanks, who is also very important for the next part of this, because he also made one about D-Day called Saving Private Ryan. There's an entire scene about D-Day in there. So, shout out to the airborne troops. They are instrumental in the days that come in liberating France. So, next up, German defenses, right? So, what is the German defenses for people who are about to land in Normandy? What are we about to expect? What are we going to... Well, I'm trying to move myself out of the way. Whoop, how about that? What are we going to expect from these people? Well, Normandy was not left completely undefended, as I've already told you guys. And it actually pitted Rommel and Eisenhower against each other for the second time in their careers, and the final time in their careers. Rommel, after his defeat in North Africa, was actually tasked with protecting the Atlantic Wall, which was the Atlantic seaboard of Europe. That's how they called it in German. And the Atlantic Wall was the buildup of giant pillboxes and stuff like this, kind of like D-Day, to protect from invasions. And that goes to the entire coast of France, northern France to western France, Brittany, all that area, as well as parts of, I think, the Netherlands and Belgium as well, I think. I'm trying to remember. So Rommel made sure, after his defeat, he said, well, you know what? I'm not going to lose to an American again. I cannot have it in my career. I refuse. So he sets about making the most strategically impenetrable fortifications he can make. He puts up massive concrete pillboxes. He puts tank traps that are shaped like an X. Not only at high tide, where the tanks are able to get into at high tide, but also at low tide. So even if they wanted to land at a different time, they couldn't land there either. So whenever the water's really high up, you can't land tanks. Whenever the water's really low down, you can't land tanks either. He has every single bit of this beach covered with that. Additionally, he puts mines out on the beaches. He puts heavy rows of barbed wire in front of the pillboxes and further down into the initial part of the landing area where these people start landing. He's got other anti-personnel objects, whether this be just little wooden contraptions that are just kind of set around that prevent people from going around it. He has a I forget what I think they're called APERS mines, which are anti-personnel mines, which are called, I think they're bounding mines at the time. Essentially, if you're running and you trip the mine, it shoots up and blows your legs off, which is horrible. But he did that. It's smart tactics from him. But he also not only did all of this with the buildup, he also additionally sighted in artillery and mortars onto the beach so that his artillerymen didn't have to take the time to sight it in on the day of the battle. And he rigorously trained his troops on how to engage the enemy at the beaches. The artillery would fire. They would blow up boats if they came in boats. If there were people who landed on the shore, people had to get shot. So he puts the newest, greatest technology, the MG-42, up in the pillboxes for this defense. MG-34s were side defenses as well. And he puts up this humongous effort to protect this beach and every beach from any type of invasion. Rommel always said to people, and this is backed up by people he worked with at the time, he always said that they were going to come to Normandy because it was the only strategically sound place for them to land at, which makes total sense to me because Rommel is a tactical genius. Let's be honest with it. It's very sad what happened to Rommel. I don't know if any of you are aware, but Rommel was essentially told either you die by your own hand or Angry Mustache Man is going to have you killed. And so he ends up taking himself out to protect his family from any reprisal from the evil German party that was in charge with Angry Mustache Man. So he was a very, very good general, a very, very ruthless tacticianer, but also a family man. And even though he worked for the Wehrmacht, so he's not technically working for the German government itself. He at every occasion said, "Hey, if we're gonna fight a war, maybe we should fight it correctly and not be idiots to the cult of personality." And for that, I do have respect for Rommel. He's a great military leader. That's all I'm saying. Not to glaze him up or anything like that. But so he made the Atlantic Wall a very formidable opponent to any force trying to invade, right? And he wasn't even there for the invasion. That's the worst part of this. So the day, I think it was the 5th, right? I think it was the 4th or the 5th, right? There's that storm that happens. And I can't remember which day Rommel's wife's birthday is. I think it's the 5th. So he leaves on the 4th. He leaves his colonel in charge. He says, "Look, Colonel, there's not going to be any invasion the next few days. I'm going back to Berlin, or I can't remember if it's Berlin or like Bavaria or somewhere like that." He's like, "I'm going back home. I'm going to spend some time with my wife. I got her these new shoes. I'm going to go give them back to her for her birthday," right? So he ends up flying out, driving down to wherever he's at. And he's like, "Hey, wifey, look, I got you these new shoes. I got you all this fancy stuff." And then they're there on the 5th. And then the morning of the 6th, he gets called, woken up out of his sleep. He's like hundreds of miles away. And he gets told, "Hey, there's people landing in France." And he's like, "No way. No one would ever land in these conditions. You're silly. You're crazy." He's like, "You know what? All right, I'll bite. I'll come back." And he gets another one. Whenever he gets dressed, he gets another call. He's like, "No, there's definitely people here." And he's like, "Oh, shit. Okay." So by the time he gets to, I think, the border of France, they've already blown up all the bridges going into Normandy. So he gets through France, and then by that time, the battle had already begun for D-Day, for the Normandy beach. So he was not even going to be taking part of it, essentially, because he would never have been able to go through. So instead, he rounds up his defenses that he can, and he starts trying to protect the northern France, area around it. So that ends up being his next task after that, and he loses D-Day, right? That's his final defeat, I believe. And it's a sad way for him to go out, but good for us in the long run. All right, so the big one. Omaha Beach. The invasion at Omaha. Excuse me. So after the initial bombardment and paratrooper drops, it was time for the amphibious landings. Soldiers who had hardly ever been on a boat were served food on the boats prior to the invasion and given anti-seasickness medicine. The combination of food, medicine, and fright from the invasion led to many of the soldiers actually getting ill on the landing boats. There is a very famous scene from Saving Private Ryan about this battle. And if you've ever seen it, you'll see there's a lot of people who just are throwing up all over the boat. And that is because a lot of them are seasick. A lot of them are just scared out of their minds. A lot of them have eaten, and now they're on a boat and having motion sickness. So it's not even seasickness, it's just motion sickness at that point. And some of them are all three of them. Because some people were actually allergic to the medicine. I forget what it wasn't Dramamine, it was something else. But they're allergic to the anti-seasickness drug, so they're actually puking the seasickness drug back up. So I want you to imagine getting on a boat like that, right? A little tiny boat. You can't see anything in front of you because there's this giant ramp, right? You land in the water, start to go. You're on this boat for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes. Getting out to where you need to be, 15, 30. The boats start making their way to the beaches. And then you start hearing the hail of gunfire. You start hearing MG-42s and 34s blasting the sides of your boat, blasting your buddies in the other boats, blasting your boat in front. Sometimes they pierce it, sometimes they don't. It just depends on how far you're away. Then you start hearing artillery shells coming over the top. You start hearing, what is that? What is that? Blows up your boat next to you. blows up another person's boat, blows up, maybe behind you in the side of the water, rocks your boat over. Sometimes people would spill off the sides of the boats, or sometimes the boat would flip because the shell was so close to them, it literally just blew up next to them and forced the boat over. And you're wearing all this heavy stuff, too, because you're getting onto an invasion. You've got your pack, you've got your gun, you've got your helmet on, you've got heavy clothes that get waterlogged very easily because they're made of wool and cotton. Then you get to the landing site and you realize, oh, the water's much deeper here than I thought it would be. So the ramp falls down and you start to get blasted by MG42 fire, MG34 fire. People in front of you are just getting eviscerated, essentially. And so you decide you're going to spill off the side, or you're going to spill out the front. You fall in the water, it's super deep. And because you have so much stuff on you, you're sinking. You can't swim. Some of these people couldn't swim at all. No one knew how to swim because they're Army guys, right? They're not Navy guys. A lot of these guys did not know how to swim. Or they're just too heavy and they can't swim. They're weak from throwing up. They're weak from maybe dehydration or something like that. They can't move. They're paralyzed with fear, whatever it might be. And these poor soldiers are having to fall off and get up to this beach and having to grab people out of the water to save them from drowning, so that they then have to face death on this big beach right here. And if you look at that picture in the background, I can see it clear as day. There's a bunch of smoke back there, right? That's from the initial bombardments. It's also from rain. It's from steam coming off because the day was very hot that day. And you're running up on this beach after all this is happening, and you're like bugged out of your mind, dude. I can't even imagine that. So once you get up to the front, though, you get onto the beach, you realize there's like little cover, right? You got the little anti-tank traps you can put on. You can put your buddy behind them. You can put yourself behind them. You can hide from it. And then there's like there's little holes, right? And I'm going to bring up these holes because this is an important story to remember. There's these little holes everywhere. And there's people who don't know what these holes are. And there's some people who do, because some of these people are veterans of other campaigns. If you don't know what these holes are artillery shell holes. And the reason you can tell is because they're blackened. Well, my grandfather, this is how he got injured. He was one of the unlucky few who had a friend who jumped into one of these holes. His friend jumps in, and as the story goes, he reaches out for his friend. There is an artillery explosion, and my granddad goes sailing. He wakes up next to where the hole was. His friend is no longer there. That is the sad and scary reality of this battle, of World War II in general. This is just a scary, sad reality of war in general, I'll say. But it's important to know that and put yourself in the shoes of these people and see how absolutely frightened that this 20-year-old, 25-year-old, like however they were, very young men, having to go through this brutal day after seasickness, after dehydration, after getting shot at, after getting blown up, after getting, in the water. It's humid, it's awful, it's muggy out, you're walking up this beach, you're getting sand in all your crevices and crap, and you get up to the freaking shoreline and you're like, oh, there's no cover, so I have to hide behind this metal thing. There's people getting gunned down all around you. And then there's like some structures up ahead. There's little wooden structures. You try to go up to the wooden structures, it gets eviscerated by like an artillery shell or by gunfire. So you have to slow crawl your way from this position right back here, right? From right here all the way up to this wall. About a quarter mile. About a quarter mile is, I think, what they said. You're slowly crawling in it, right? It's taking you probably like an hour to get up there. You can't move whenever there's no smoke because guess what? You're going to get fired at. You can't move whenever they're firing because you're going to get fired at. So you have to wait for them to reload and there to be cover for you to move up. Or if they're looking at someone else. And when the time you get up to that wall back there, right? It's a stone wall. And then there's a berm that stone wall is on. And there's essentially you have to climb over it and go on top of a hill to get behind the pillbox. Or to get onto the other side in front of the pillboxes, right? So you get to that side. And you climb over the berm once you have a lot of people with you, and they start shooting at you again, right? And you have to cross no man's land, essentially. Run further up here, and then up here, which you can't see, there is another row of barbed wire. And so you have to throw Bangalore mines underneath the barbed wire to blow up a hole, because that's the only way you can clear this stuff right now. So they get Bangalore torpedoes, which are essentially handheld torpedoes that they made specifically for engineers to like blow up obstacles, and they throw these Bangalore torpedoes inside of these areas where they put these barbed wire fences up, and they blow up big holes. And they finally get through the barbed wire fences, and then they're met with essentially foxholes, like little trenches that are built in between the pillboxes, where they have other German soldiers waiting for them. So you have to clear out the German soldiers from that. Then you make your way up the hill to the top where the pillbox is, or underneath, because sometimes they had entrances from the trenches into the pillboxes. You go from two sides, go up, clear out that, and then you clear out the pillbox itself up top, and then finally, after I don't even know how many hours this would have been. Probably, if I'm remembering right, it was probably over 6 hours of fighting. You finally clear out a pillbox, and then finally your buddies behind you can finally make it ashore somewhat safer than they had been. And then after you do that, you don't even get a minute to reprieve, or a minute's reprieve from anything, because behind that is artillery that are still shelling your guys. So you move up and you start fighting the artillery pieces, and the soldiers defending them. And then finally you clear out the artillery pieces. Well, what's behind them? Anti-air weapons. So you have to go clear out that too. And then finally, at the end of the day, probably like 4 or 5 p.m. in the afternoon, you're finally done. You're finally done clearing out Omaha Beach. And that is the gruesome reality of what happened here specifically, and probably at Juneau as well. Just because of the staunch defense that the Germans made, and the incredible bravery from these troops, from the Americans, the British, the Canadians, all these troops that fought at D-Day. And that's not talking about the paratroopers who had to hold out for 24 hours until these guys could even land and get back to them. And then even after that, there's commandos that land at Point Duhok, which is another place, I think, south of all of these beaches. And they have to clear out a naval train, or they have to clear out a train station to prevent more troops from coming back to reinforce them. And they actually have to blow up a bunch of stuff, like a bunch of railways, to stop them. All that being said, these guys finally get done. They start bringing on all this stuff. They clear out the barbed wire. There's a story from D-Day that's very interesting to me. I think it's the USS Texas. Seeing that there's still a lot of fighting going on behind even the anti-air, they wanted to be able to call in fire for their troops. So they are a naval ship, right? They're like a battleship. So they're like, well, what are you going to do with a battleship? You can't call in artillery with a battleship. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, yes, you can. And they do. Soldiers keep fighting further on after Omaha Beach and into the rest of Normandy, and they start calling in requests for fire. So we don't have any artillery up yet because we're still landing onto the beaches. Well, USS Texas says, "Hold my fucking beer, dude." USS Texas beaches itself on Omaha Beach, right? Purposefully puts itself on the beach itself, aims the there's like a part in a ship where you can flood it and it'll make the ship tilt up. It's to prevent it from going underwater. So they float the ballast, I believe it's called, or they flood the ballast and they make the ship tilt up slightly. They aim the cannon, like the battleship's like main cannon up, and they start doing fire missions for these troops inland so that they have some artillery. And so these guys start doing that for a good part of the day as well, which is very funny to me because it's just like one of those things that you would never expect to have happen. And then finally, everyone's broken through, I think, by the end of the day, for D-Day. Nobody else would have been left. They took some prisoners. They had a lot of medical wounded to attend to, which thankfully a lot of people ended up living after their horrible injuries at this war, because thankfully it's World War II and not Gettysburg. They didn't have to chop off limbs or anything like that, so that's good news. My granddad was one of them. Shout out to Granddad, rest in peace. Cool guy. So the aftermath and impact of D-Day, right? So it led to Allied victory in France and Western Europe. It essentially opened up the gateway for us to then not only liberate Normandy itself, but liberate Paris and thus all of France. After that, it really allowed the French resistance to gather a lot of gather up a lot more support and a lot more members. So it really made this mass recruiting drive for the French resistance and other resistance groups in Europe. After that as well, the actions by the paratroopers on these days actually led to American Armed Forces trust in paratroopers being at an all-time high, as well as British Armed Forces or British paratroopers being at an all-time high as well. So this actually is the reason why Operation Market Garden happens, because they saw how effective they were during D-Day, so they start leading to Operation Market Garden. Operation Market Garden is a huge failure for paratrooper forces, which unfortunately is why paratroopers aren't really used today, because they learn from lessons like that. But Market Garden is seen as a huge failure. There was a lot of successful things in it, but it was mostly a failure. They tried to take back the Benelux with a massive paratrooper drop, and it does not go according to plan. But that's what aided in causing Market Garden to happen. This is the most important and largest amphibious landing in military history, and not a single Marine was there to take place in it. I like to say that to my Marine buddies because it's very funny. The Army and the Navy did it, and the Marines didn't do nothing. It's so funny to me. I'm joking. All those guys were fighting over in the Pacific. But anyways, the other impacts of this, right? It leads to Rommel being relieved of command, which then leads to him having a lot of frustrations with the party that rules Germany at the time, and then ultimately leads to his demise. It really props up American, Canadian, and British armed forces trust in each other, because they believe that everyone's looking out for everyone now. After the horrific campaigns of Italy and North Africa, it finally leads to some trust between those three friends, which is awesome. And furthermore from that, it leads to shared communication. The Allied headquarters that they made actually led to a lot of reports being shared between those three countries, so America, Britain, and Canada. And that's actually what leads us to a lot of our allies today for like 4 and 5 Eyes nations. If you don't know what those are, it's certain people who you are very sensitive with information to, especially for military stuff. And those people it's a result of this communication from Allied command, essentially. And after this, the battle just gets a little bit difficult, because they have to then retake Bastogne and St. Lo and Metz and all these other places, but then they get out to Western Germany and the Benelux region, and it's like they had the Battle of the Bulge, but this opens it up, right? This opens up the new theater. This is exactly what Stalin wanted. He wanted to open up a second theater that actually was dangerous to the Germans, because it helped them move troops further west, because they didn't want, for some reason, they didn't want the British to have. I assume that the reason why they moved so many troops out west is because they did not want the British and the French to have a second Treaty of Versailles against them. However, that ends up being a little bit of their downfall, because they move so many troops out west that out east the Russians keep conquering land and taking over their troops, and all their smartest generals essentially are out the west, because they're having to fight actual tactics against very, very tactically smart generals in America and Britain. Meanwhile, out east, they're fighting tooth and nail for blade of grass. So, but it's a very interesting, cool battle. And I would always like to remember everybody. This is like the important part for some of this stuff, right? Especially for something as harrowing as D-Day. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you guys remember D-Day as much as you can, right? A lot of people, especially here in America, we don't tend to remember D-Day because we weren't alive during it. And people like my grandfather and my great-grandfather, my great-grandfather specifically, who was in the war, a lot of these people aren't alive anymore, right? So we need to carry on the legacy of remembering what happened on this day. It's a harrowing event. It's horrible, but it had to happen for us to live in the free society that we have today, right? So there is a cemetery at Normandy Beach that remembers all the people who fell at Normandy. It's at like the place where the pillboxes is. It's right behind that. And the beach, you can go see it today. There's a famous picture. I can't remember where it's at. There's a very famous picture of a screenshot side by side of what it looked like on World War II versus what it looked like today. I think that was taken on the 75th anniversary, but it was like looks the exact same, just without all the carnage, right? But please do take care of remembering some of these events are very, very important to people, and people who have family members who are involved with it, and people like that. You know, it's a good thing to remember. The 80th anniversary was literally just last month. It will be exactly a month in 3 days. But they had 80th anniversary celebration. I know President Biden and a bunch of the other world leaders were there talking about, D-Day, which was cool. But that's a great thing to remember, right? 80th anniversary of this stuff. Most of these guys are probably not going to be around for the 85th. Most of them are not going to be around for the 90th, and I don't think any of them will be around for the 100th. So, if you have a veteran in your community that was at D-Day, go thank him for his service, right? Go talk to him. Go say something to him about it, right? Because if you don't say something now and you want to learn or you want to hear someone's account of it firsthand, waiting too long is going to cause you to miss out on the opportunity. And I know it's harrowing. A lot of people don't like talking about stuff, and I get that. So if they don't want to talk about it, don't press them on it. But if you want to learn something or you want to ask them questions about, what was it like in like England at that time or whatever, whenever you had to go over there, now's the time to do it, because otherwise these guys are going to be gone for good. And it's very sad to lose a big part of your own history to just time, right? But in conclusion, does anyone have any questions about what we covered today? Or does anyone want a quiz? I'm joking. There's no quiz. Or is there? No questions. Sweet. All right. Well, there we go. Good evening. Hello, Grindel. Hello. You got here just in time to see me into my PowerPoint. Do you have any questions about D-Day, Grindel? What's the subject? Let me think of a quick question. The subject's D-Day. We literally just covered an entire PowerPoint about D-Day. Yeah, D-Day. The Allied invasion of Normandy and northern France, I guess, technically. I'll wait for any questions. I have another 2 seconds. No, I'm joking. If no more questions, though, I'll wait for Grindel to give his question. But if no more questions, we're going to switch back to just yapping. Ooh. Let's see. All right. Oh, crap. I forgot I need to move my guy. Oh, my God. Oh. There we go. Is this better? There we go. Okay, sweet. Should D-Day fail or lag? How would the Allies' chances of winning be affected? Well, okay, so a lot of people debate this topic. I'm actually quite I don't. Okay, here's the main thing, right? There's a lot of misconceptions about war, and as somebody who is not only somebody who has fought in war, but is also somebody who has literally been in intelligence and like supplies and stuff like this, and actually studies it. I don't think the Germans' chances of winning really, I don't think the Germans' chances of winning even improve slightly. Because I think the Allies, had they failed at D-Day, probably would have ended up doing something similar, maybe further south or further up north. It just depends on how they're thinking at this point. Now, in an event of like mass casualties, like maybe 10 times worse than what they were, you're looking at maybe the Brits bow out of the war, but I don't think America would have bowed out. And we only had 71,000 troops at the time for D-Day itself. We also had another like 75,000 troops down in like Italy, I think, maybe less than that. So that was only like a percentage of our force. We had a lot of people in the Pacific, but we had a lot of young men who were still in training. I don't think we lose. I think we gain less ground for the Cold War. I think that's a possibility. I think Germany puts a lot more troops on the Eastern Front, and maybe that causes Russia to falter somewhat. I don't think so, though. Russia just had so many troops and people that they were willing to sacrifice for that to not happen that I just cannot see it being at all changing the way that we and plus we had the bomb was in production by then too, so even if they stopped D-Day, the bomb was coming to them because we were specifically producing it for the Germans. Uh, Maybe it extends out the war maybe another year, but other than that, Germany's still going to lose the war. Their troops, their manpower, everything was so riddled by then that it's just not feasible for them to. I mean, they're not even going to get the Italians to be fighting with them. The Italians had already bowed out and tried to like overthrow Mussolini at this point. Um, had just that in mind. The Bolsheviks would have advanced till France. I don't know if they would have got to France. They definitely would have gotten further into Germany. Um, Maybe Italy as well. Maybe Greece. But I don't think they would have gotten into France at least. Just based off of how many troops that the Germans would have been able to save if the Allies, especially if the British had actually bowed out of the war, and the Americans were just the only ones they were fighting with. Maybe it just depends. The Bolsheviks would have spread for sure, though. Obviously at that time, Bolshevism was the thing that was a very big worry for a lot of people, especially after World War II. So I could see it. I could see it. I could definitely see it getting to the edge of France. I don't think it would take over France. Maybe it would take over France, though. France had a very hard tilt to the left at that time, so maybe, but I don't know. I think Germans kind of like killed most of their academics or whatever you want to call them that were like very high on Bolshevism, but that's a different topic for a different time. Any more questions, though? um, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting topic though. I like going through the alternative history stuff for this. That's why I like playing Hearts of Iron 4, because it's super fun to like pretend to be like some grandiose. I always like making the Persian Empire with like Iran or like Turkey, and like going back and having like the Persian Empire, like the Ottoman Empire or whatever, because it's just funny. It's just funny to like make like weird things like that in a World War II game. But I don't know. I I just can't. I can't even fathom Germany having enough manpower to do that, dude. They're so deep into World War II at that point. I mean, they're literally losing people hand over fist in Russia too. I mean, I just can't see it. I cannot. I just let's see. Any other questions though, guys? If not, I'm about to turn on the music. Actually, I probably should turn on the music because I realized I just closed it out. Whoops. Uh, but I do hope you guys enjoyed the lesson. I'm gonna try and upload that one to YouTube. I think I said that with the last one, and I'm still going through it, but I am actually debating whether or not to upload that one. Persian Empire, True to Barb, Iran, Shah. I don't very based, very based. I don't understand a word of that, but I assure you, I wholeheartedly don't understand it. Very based. Iran Shar, very based. Yes, very based indeed. No, I'm joking. Um, I do like doing some of that stuff with. So Grindel, I don't know if you watched before because I think you're a newer follower. Um, we were playing last Saturday. We were playing Crusader Kings 3, and we started in 867, and we got to I think 910 AD. I want to say, but we're like smack dab in the middle of like creating the British Britannian Empire. So if you want to watch that, we're going to be doing that again on Saturday. It's very fun. I love doing that. But I'm probably going to do Hearts of Iron 4 soon rather than later, but Hearts of Iron 4 just lasts so long, and there's so much lag and stuff, dude. Especially if you don't... Oh, man. Some of those armies just get so big at some point, and it's like, oh my god, please. Super nice. Yeah, let's see here. Let's put on some... Is it this one? Hold up. I had one last week and I was trying to play... Oh, here it is. Boom. Oh my god. Scared me. Boom. Oh, appreciate it, man. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for stopping by before you go to bed. Yeah, it was a fun time. If you want to watch back the VOD, though, it's going to be saved afterwards, so you can come back and watch it if you feel like it. If not, you're all good. I appreciate you stopping by, man. Have a good night's sleep, and we'll see you hopefully on Saturday. I don't know if Irvine and them are here, too, but I appreciate them stopping in. I think I should have probably played the alert again, but I didn't have it pulled up, so that's me for being scuffed. Oh, well. Whatever. What are you going to do? Oh, yeah. But did you guys think the presentation was good, decent, though? I thought it was pretty good. But yeah, D-Day. Sick. Very fun. But I think it might be time to wind down. I like teaching history, but it does take a while and a lot of brain power, so we might start winding down a little bit. I think, yeah, we got like another... about 3-4 minutes before we end up here, but yeah, I appreciate everybody stopping by. I know it's kind of been like a weird thing. I'm still trying to decide how I want to do this. I don't really know how some of the streaming stuff works super well just yet, but I think as for the lessons, I think I do decently well with the lessons, so I hope everyone learns something at least. I know it's not super in-depth D-Day stuff. I tried to go at least a little bit past the surface level information that you probably already know about. But, you know, if you learned something, please let me know. I appreciate you all stopping by. I'm going to try and find, without the help of Mr. Mad Lad, since he's not here today, I think I'm going to try and find a streamer to raid. I think I know who I want to get. I think I want to do Ko-Fi or Coffee underscore CH, is that her name? Ooh, okay. No. But we're going to raid her because I like her channel. She's a nice person. I've watched her a few times, but if you guys want to join in on the raid, we're going to end here at the top of the 30-minute mark and go raid her channel. I wanted to do like a 2:30 stream, but we went through that presentation faster than I anticipated, so maybe I'll only do 2 hours normally. But yeah, maybe later on, if I get a little bit more comfortable with it, we'll do 2:30 or 3. I guess it depends on what the people want. So. But other than that, guys, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Hope you guys learned something from my lesson here. Please give us a follow if you haven't. If you're watching from your computer, your phone, your tablet, whatever. If you haven't followed, please do so. We're on the path to affiliate. Only need 18 more followers to hit all of the marks for that. We just passed our 7 days worth of streaming today. So I appreciate everybody who's been here in support of the channel since then. Again, appreciate everybody coming out, and I'm going to send it over to Coffee CH. Let me make sure that she is live. Looks like it. We got some viewers up here. So, the raid message is just sent in the chat. We bring the warmth of the forge and coffee, of course. If you guys want to contribute to the channel or whatever, or you guys want to give me suggestions, please leave a suggestion down in the box below on your chat. If you just scroll down, you can leave a suggestion down there. If you have any other things that you want to talk to me about, you want to follow me on Twitter to get my hot takes on the current goings-ons of anything, anime, or maybe the news, or the hot topics, I don't know, VTubers themselves, follow me on Twitter. I got my Twitter linked on my channel, as well as the YouTube. We just uploaded our first YouTube short the other day. It did pretty well. I'm very happy with it. I appreciate everybody for going and checking that out, and follow me on all the socials and on here. Yeah, guys, again, appreciate all the support. It's been a great first month of streaming, and I hope to see all of your beautiful, shining, smiling faces on Saturday for the super stream, where we go and play a little bit of Crusader Kings 2 or 3, well, Crusader Kings 3. But we might be doing something else. I don't know, guys. Depends on what the people want. I'm a man of the people, and I'm going to continue to be that way till the day I die. But, again, appreciate y'all for coming. Let's go check out coffee, and peace!
For the raid! Hi raiders! How are you guys doing? My name's Kofi. I'm a pink cat VTuber. Bring the warmth of the forge and coffee, of course. Nice! Can I get a shout for Max while I continue to beat up people in Star Rail? Thank you so